Hey everyone, March 24th, day one of the COVID-19 self-questering. I think we're all already a little stir-crazy, but I thought maybe we ought to just read a book together. I have selected Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There are 14 chapters in this book. It's illustrated, if you look right there, by the great Ralph Steadman. Later on, as we do this thing, I'll show you. I think I have a couple of originals of Ralph's in here. But anyway, well, make yourself comfortable. Quick shout out to John Caswell for Hope Amongst Hope digging up a copy of this book. I've gone through about 30 copies in my life, and funny, at the moment I needed it most, I didn't have one. But before I get going, let's start out in absence of a real president. I want to go back to my favorite, Teddy Roosevelt. You see him in the glare there. It's a quote from his autobiography in 1913. Americans learn only from catastrophes and not from experience. That being said, hope you all got a drink, maybe a little puff. Thank you, Melvin Litton, for a little cigar action for later. I got to see Hunter S. back in the late 70s, early 80s at KU, and he walked in, sat down in a big old chair with a big old glass, lit up a cigarette, and began to talk. So, again, in honor of Hunter S. and hoping us all get through this COVID-19 BS, let's read us a couple of chapters from Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I'll show you the illustrations. There's the great Hunter S. himself. You see him? I'm just going to figure out how to do this. There we go. And again, another great illustration from our friend Ralph Steadman. Let's start. The dedication is to Bob Giger, for reasons that need not be explained here, and to Bob Dylan. There's an epigraph. He who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. Dr. Johnson. And so we begin. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Part 1. We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, I feel lightheaded. Maybe you should drive. And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with the top down to Las Vegas. And a voice was screaming, Holy Jesus, what are these goddamned animals? Then it was quiet again. My attorney had taken his shirt off and was pouring beer on his chest to facilitate the tanning process. What the hell are you yelling about? He muttered, staring up at the sun with his eyes closed and covered with a wraparound Spanish sunglasses. Never mind, I said. It's your turn to drive. I hit the brakes and aimed the great red shark towards the shoulder of the highway. No point mentioning those bats, I thought. Poor bastard will see 'em soon enough. It was almost noon, and we still had more than 100 miles to go. They'd be tough miles. Very soon I knew we would both be completely twisted, but there was no going back and no time to rest. We'd have to ride it out. Press registration for the fabulous Mint 400 was already underway, and we had to get there by 4 to claim our soundproof suite. A fashionable sporting magazine in New York had taken care of the reservations, along with this huge red Chevy convertible we had just rented off a lot on the Sunset Strip. And I was, after all, a professional journalist, so I had an obligation to cover the story, for good or ill. The sporting editors had also given me $300 in cash, most of which was already spent on extremely dangerous drugs. The trunk of the car looked like a mobile police narcotics lab. We had 2 bags of grass, 75 pellets of mescaline, 5 sheets of high-powered blotter acid, a salt shaker half full of cocaine, and a whole galaxy of multicolored uppers, downers, screamers, laughers, and also a quart of tequila, a quart of rum, a case of Budweiser, a pint of raw ether, and 2 dozen amyls. All this had been rounded up the night before in a frenzy of high-speed driving all over Los Angeles County, from Topanga to Watts. We picked up everything we could get our hands on. Not that we needed all of that for the trip, but once you get locked into a serious drug collection, the tendency is to push it as far as you can. The only thing that really worried me was the ether. There was nothing in the world more helpless and irresponsible and depraved than a man in the depths of an ether binge, and I knew he'd get into that rotten stuff pretty soon, probably at the next gas station. We had sampled almost everything else, and now, yes, it was time for a long snort of ether. And then, do the next 100 miles in a horrible, slobbering sort of spastic stupor. The only way to keep alert on ether is to do up a lot of amyls. Not all at once, but steady. Just enough to maintain the focus at 90 miles an hour through Barstow. Man, this is the way to travel, said my attorney. He leaned over to turn up the volume on the radio, humming along with the rhythm section and kind of moaning the words, "One toke over the line, sweet Jesus, one toke over the line." "One toke? You poor fool, wait till you see that goddamn bats." You could barely hear the radio. Slumped over on the far side of the seat, grappling with the tape recorder turned all the way up, Sympathy for the Devil. That was the only tape we had, so we played it constantly, over and over, as kind of demented counterpoint to the radio, and also to maintain our rhythm on the road. A constant speed is good for gas mileage, and for some reason that seemed important at the time. Indeed, on a trip like this, one must be careful about gas consumption. Avoid those quick bursts of acceleration that drag blood to the back of the brain. My attorney saw the hitchhiker long before I did. "Hey man, let's give this boy a lift," he said. And before I could mount any argument, he was stopped and this poor oaky kid was running up to the car with a big grin on his face saying, "Hot damn, I never rode in a convertible before." "Is that right?" I said. "Well, I guess you're about ready, eh?" The kid nodded eagerly, and we roared off. "We're your friends," said my attorney. "We're not like the others." Oh, Christ, I thought. He's gone round the bend. "No more talk of that talk," I said abruptly, "or I'll put the leeches on you." He grinned, seeming to understand. Luckily, the noise in the car was so awful between the wind and the radio and the tape machine that the kid in the back seat couldn't hear a word we were saying. Or could he? How long can we maintain, I wondered. How long before one of us starts raving and jabbering at this boy? What will he think of us then? This same lonely desert was the last known home of the Manson family. We'll make that grim connection when my attorney starts screaming about the bats and the huge manta rays coming down on the car. If so, well, we'll just have to cut his head off and bury him somewhere, because it goes without saying that we can't turn him loose. He'll report us at once some kind of outback Nazi law enforcement agency, and they'll run us down like dogs. Jesus, did I say that? Or just thinking? Was I talking? Did they hear me? I glanced over at my attorney, but he seemed oblivious, watching the road, driving our great red shark along at 110 or so. There was no sound from the back seat. Maybe I'd better chat with this boy, I thought. Perhaps if I explain things, he'll rest easy. Of course, I leaned around in the seat and gave him a fine big smile, admiring the shape of his skull. "By the way," I said, "there's one thing you should probably understand." He stared at me, not blinking. He was gritting his teeth. "Can you hear me?" I yelled. He nodded. "That's good," I said, "because I want you to know that we're on our way to Las Vegas to find the American dream." I smiled. That's why we rented this car. It's the only way to do it. Can you grasp that? He nodded again, but his eyes were nervous. I want you to have all the background, I said, because this is a very ominous assignment, with overtones of extreme personal danger. Hell, I forgot all about the beer. You want one? He shook his head. Well, how about some ether, I said. What? Never mind, let's get right to the heart of this thing. You see, about 24 hours ago, we were sitting in the Polo Lounge of the Beverly Hills Hotel, in the patio section, of course. And we were just sitting there, under a palm tree, when this uniformed dwarf came up to me with a pink telephone and said, This must be the call you've been waiting for all this time, sir. I laughed and ripped open a can of beer that foamed all over the back seat while I was talking. And you know, he was right. I had been expecting that call, but I didn't know who it would come from. Do you follow me? The boy's face was a mask of pure fear and bewilderment. I blundered on. I want you to understand that this man at the wheel is my attorney. He's not just some dingbat I found on the strip. Shit, look at him. He doesn't look like you or me, right? That's because he's a foreigner. I think he's probably Samoan, but it doesn't matter, does it? Are you prejudiced? Kid hiking in the desert from Oklahoma. Are you prejudiced? Oh, hell no, he blurted. I didn't think so, I said, because in spite of his race, this man is extremely valuable to me. I glanced over at my attorney, but his mind was somewhere else. I whacked the back of the driver's seat with my fist. This is important, goddammit. This is a true story. And the car kept swerving sickeningly, then straightened out. Keep your hands off my fucking neck, my attorney screamed. The kid in the back looked like he was ready to jump right out of the car and take his chances. Our vibrations were getting nasty, but why? I was puzzled, frustrated. Was there no communication in this car? Had we deteriorated to the level of the dumb beasts? Because my story was true. I was certain of that. And it was extremely important, I felt, for the meaning of our journey to be made absolutely clear. We had actually been sitting there in the Polo Lounge for many hours drinking Singapore slings with mezcal on the side and beer chasers, and when they all came, I was ready. The dwarf approached our table cautiously, as I recall, and when he handed me the pink telephone, I said nothing, merely listened. Then I hung up, turning to face my attorney. That was headquarters, I said. They want me to go to Las Vegas at once and make contact with a Portuguese photographer named Lacerda. He'll have the details. All I have to do is check into my suite and he'll seek me out. My attorney said nothing for a moment. Then he suddenly came alive in his chair. God, hell, he exclaimed. I think I see the pattern. This one sounds like real trouble. He tucked his khaki undershirt into his white rayon bell-bottoms and called for more drinks. You're going to need plenty of legal advice before this thing is over, he said. And my first advice is that you should rent a very fast car with no top and get the hell out of LA for at least 48 hours. He shook his head sadly. This blows my weekend because naturally I'm going to have to go with you. And we're going to have to arm ourselves. Why the hell not, I said. If a thing like this is worth doing at all, it's worth doing right. We'll need some decent equipment, plenty of cash on the line, if it's only for the drugs, and the super sensitive tape recorder for the sake of a permanent record. Well, what kind of story is this, he asked. The story is the Mint 400, I said. It's the richest off-the-road race for motorcycles and dune buggies in the history of organized sport, a fantastic spectacle in honor of some fatback grossero named Del Webb, who owns the luxurious Mint Hotel in the heart of downtown Las Vegas. Well, that's at least what the press release says. My man in New York just read it to me. Well, he said, as your attorney, I advise you to buy a motorcycle. How else can you cover a thing like this righteously? No way, I said. Where can we get a hold of a Vincent Black Shadow? What's that? It's a fantastic bike, I said. The new model is something like 2,000 cubic inches, developing 200 brake horsepower at 4,000 revolutions per minute on a magnesium frame with 2 styrofoam seats and a total curb weight of exactly 200 pounds. That sounds about right for this gig, he said. It is, I assured him. The fucker's not much for turning, but it's pure hell on a straightaway. I'll outrun a F-111 until takeoff. Takeoff, he said. Can we handle that much torque? Absolutely, I said. I'll call New York for some cash. And thus ends Chapter 1 of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. Hope to see you guys tomorrow night for Chapter 2. Thank you.